Did you know that 97% of people go to their graves with their greatest potential still locked inside them? This startling truth has haunted me throughout my decades of research into the minds of the world's most accomplished individuals. The difference between those who achieve greatness and those who merely exist is not talent, education, or opportunity, it's their relationship with fear. After spending 20 years interviewing the most successful people of my era, from Thomas Edison to Henry Ford to Andrew Carnegie, discovered something remarkable. The greatest obstacle to success isn't outside of you, it's within you. You see, deep within your mind exists what I call the inner saboteur, a powerful force designed to protect you from danger, but which often ends up protecting you from success. This inner saboteur speaks in the language of fear, creating elaborate scenarios of failure and rejection that feel absolutely real, even when they're merely phantoms of your imagination. Consider this. When you were about to ask for that promotion, apply for that dream position, or launch that business venture, did a voice inside whisper all the reasons you would fail? Did your stomach tighten, your palms sweat, and your resolve weaken? That wasn't wisdom speaking, that was your inner saboteur. The tragedy is not that this voice exists, that most people never learn how to identify it, confront it, and ultimately transform it from an obstacle into an ally. And so they remain trapped, perpetually on the edge of greatness, but never stepping across the threshold. What if I told you that the very fears holding you back are actually disguised indicators of your greatest potential? What if the areas where you feel the most resistance are precisely where your greatest opportunities await? The successful individuals I've studied don't lack fear. They've simply mastered the ability to deactivate their inner saboteur when it threatens to derail their ambitions. In this video, I'm going to teach you the exact principles that the world's highest achievers use to silence their inner critic and transform paralyzing fear into purposeful action. These are not theoretical concepts, but proven methods that have created fortunes and changed the course of industries. Methods that I've personally witnessed transform ordinary men and women into extraordinary success stories. You're about to discover why conventional approaches to overcoming fear, positive thinking alone, simply pushing through, or waiting until you feel ready, are fundamentally flawed and often make your fears stronger. Did you know that 97% of people never achieve their true potential because of a hidden enemy that operates within their own minds? This enemy is more dangerous than any external obstacle you will ever face. I call it the inner saboteur, a force so insidious that most people live their entire lives under its control without ever recognizing its existence. My friends, I've spent decades studying the minds of the most successful men and women in America, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that the difference between those who achieve greatness and those who merely dream about it comes down to one critical factor: the ability to recognize and neutralize this inner saboteur. You see, every time you felt that inexplicable hesitation before taking action, every time you've talked yourself out of pursuing an opportunity, every time you've settled for less than you deserve, that wasn't you making a rational decision. That was your inner saboteur at work, using fear as its primary weapon to keep you confined to a life of mediocrity. What if I told you that this force, this inner saboteur, operates according to specific patterns that, once understood, can be completely disarmed? What if the very fears that have held you back throughout your life could be transformed into the fuel for your greatest achievements? In my extensive interviews with Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, and hundreds of other remarkable achievers, I discovered something extraordinary. These individuals weren't born without fear. They experienced the same doubts and hesitations as everyone else. The difference was that they developed specific mental techniques to deactivate these fears before they could take root. Tonight, I'm going to share with you the exact psychological framework these exceptional men and women used to silence their inner saboteur and achieve what others considered impossible. This framework isn't based on mere theory or wishful thinking. It's derived from the actual thought patterns and mental habits of America's greatest success stories. You won't find these techniques in ordinary psychology textbooks or self-improvement manuals. The insights I'm about to reveal come directly from the minds of those who have demonstrated their validity through extraordinary achievement in every field of human endeavor. By the time we conclude our conversation today, you will understand not only why your inner saboteur has been able to control your actions for so long, but precisely how to strip it of its power forever. You'll discover how to transform the very fears that have held you back into the driving force behind your greatest achievements. I must warn you, however, what I'm about to share will challenge many of your deeply held beliefs about yourself and your capabilities. It may be uncomfortable at first, as all meaningful growth tends to be, but I promise you this: if you apply these principles with persistence and precision, your life will transform in ways you can scarcely imagine right now. Before we continue, I want you to make me a promise. Promise yourself that you will not merely listen passively to what I share today, but that you will actually implement these techniques in your daily life. Knowledge without application is like owning a powerful automobile without ever taking it out of the garage. A tragic waste of potential. I've witnessed these principles transform the lives of countless individuals, from factory workers to captains of industry, from struggling salesmen to renowned artists. The only question that remains is, will you be next? If you're ready to finally break free from the invisible chains of fear and self-doubt that have held you back. If you're prepared to claim the extraordinary life that has always been your birthright, then join our growing community of achievement-minded individuals. Subscribe to this channel now and ensure you never miss another lesson in the science of personal achievement. Now, let us begin the process of identifying and disarming your inner saboteur so you can finally step into the life of prosperity, purpose, and power that you were always meant to live. Let me tell you about a man I once knew. We'll call him Edward. Edward was blessed with an extraordinary mind, a first-rate education, and opportunities that most would envy. By all external measures, he should have achieved remarkable success. Yet at 45 years old, he found himself in a position far below his potential, watching others with half his talent advance beyond him. When I asked Edward what held him back, he offered the usual explanations: bad luck, office politics, economic conditions. But as our conversation deepened, the truth emerged. Every time Edward stood at the threshold of a significant opportunity, a chorus of internal voices would begin their assault. Who do you think you are? You'll make a fool of yourself? Better to stay where you're safe. Edward's case is not unique. In my research interviewing over 500 of the most successful individuals in America, I discovered that every single one of them had faced their own version of this inner saboteur. The difference was that they had developed methods to recognize and overcome it. Your inner saboteur operates with remarkable efficiency because it knows you intimately. It understands your deepest insecurities, your childhood wounds, your previous disappointments. It leverages this knowledge to construct fears so persuasive, so seemingly rational, that you mistake them for wisdom or prudence. In reality, they are sophisticated illusions designed with one purpose: to keep you exactly where you are. The conventional approaches to overcoming fear are precisely why most people remain trapped. Society tells you to feel the fear and do it anyway, or to think positive thoughts. These well-intentioned but superficial strategies are like trying to eliminate weeds by cutting off their visible stems, while leaving the roots intact. They may provide temporary relief, but the fears inevitably return, often stronger than before. Consider this sobering truth. Statistics indicate that only about 5% of Americans achieve financial independence by retirement age. Only about 3% could be classified as truly successful across all important domains of life. The remainder, that staggering 97%, live lives of quiet resignation, convinced that their limitations are fixed and unchangeable. What separates these two groups is not intelligence, education, or opportunity. I have met brilliant, well-educated, well-connected individuals who achieved very little, and I have met those born in poverty, with minimal education and seemingly no advantages, who rose to extraordinary heights. The difference lies entirely in their relationship with fear and how they respond to the voice of their inner saboteur. Let me share something that might surprise you. In my extensive interviews with people who failed to achieve their goals, I discovered that most had never actually failed at all. They had simply given up before they could succeed, persuaded by their inner saboteur that failure was inevitable. A salesman prepares to approach an important client, but at the last moment, his inner saboteur whispers, "They're too big for someone like you. You'll waste their time." He never makes the call. A woman with entrepreneurial dreams fills out the paperwork to start her business, but her inner saboteur reminds her of her family's financial struggles when she was a child. Security is everything, it tells her. Don't risk what you have. The paperwork remains unfiled. A talented writer completes his manuscript but never submits it to publishers because his inner saboteur convinces him that rejection would confirm his deepest fear, that he has nothing valuable to say. These individuals don't appear in any statistics about failure because technically they never tried. Yet their unfulfilled potential represents one of the greatest tragedies of human existence. The dreams that die without ever being given a chance to live. Your inner saboteur doesn't just rob you of external achievements. Its most devastating effect is on your self-concept, your belief about who you are and what you're capable of. With each victory it wins, your sense of your own potential shrinks. Over time, you begin to identify with your limitations rather than your possibilities. Your inner saboteur no longer needs to work so hard because you've internalized its message. This is just who I am. I've observed this pattern in thousands of lives, and its consistency is as remarkable as it is heartbreaking. The inner saboteur follows the same playbook across different personalities, backgrounds, and circumstances. It exploits universal human vulnerabilities, our need for safety, our desire for approval, our fear of the unknown, and turns them against us. What makes this enemy so challenging is not just its persistence but its legitimacy. It disguises itself as the voice of reason, of prudence, of responsible thinking. It presents its case with evidence drawn from your past experiences and observations. It sounds so sensible that you thank it for its counsel even as it leads you away from your most cherished dreams. My friends, until you understand the mechanisms through which your inner saboteur operates, until you can recognize its voice and distinguish it from your authentic wisdom, you will remain under its influence, living a fraction of the life that could be yours. But there is another path, a path taken by those rare individuals who have learned to transform their relationship with fear and, in doing so, have transformed their lives. What I am about to share with you is not another set of motivational platitudes or temporary confidence boosters. This is a fundamental reconfiguration of your relationship with fear itself, a methodology developed and refined through my 20 years of studying the most successful minds in America. You see, while others have approached fear as something to be overcome through sheer willpower or eliminated through positive thinking, my research revealed something far more profound. Fear itself is neutral. It is neither your enemy nor an obstacle to be conquered. In the hands of someone who understands its true nature, Fear becomes the very fuel that drives extraordinary achievement. This discovery came to me gradually as I observed a peculiar pattern among the most accomplished individuals I interviewed. These men and women, from industrialists like Andrew Carnegie to inventors like Thomas Edison, experienced fear just as intensely as anyone else. But they had developed a unique relationship with it, a way of channeling its energy rather than being paralyzed by it. I call this methodology fear transmutation, the systematic process of converting the negative energy of fear into positive, productive power. This is not a trick of positive thinking or a temporary state of courage. It is a fundamental rewiring of your mental circuits that permanently changes how your mind processes fear. Let me be clear about something that few others will tell you. Your inner saboteur cannot be eliminated entirely. It is woven into the very fabric of your mind's design, a primitive survival mechanism that once served an essential purpose. Attempting to eliminate it completely is not only futile but potentially dangerous, as it would remove an important part of your psychological makeup. Instead, what I have discovered is a way to recognize this saboteur, understand its patterns, and systematically redirect its enormous energy toward constructive ends. This is the secret that allowed Henry Ford to persist through multiple business failures before revolutionizing the automobile industry. It's what enabled Helen Keller to transform the devastating limitations of being deaf and blind into a platform that inspired millions. I must emphasize that what distinguishes my approach from others is its foundation in the actual thought patterns of demonstrably successful individuals. When I began my research at the suggestion of Andrew Carnegie, I was determined not to develop another theoretical system but to document the actual mental processes used by those who had already achieved extraordinary results. Over years of intensive interviews, I identified specific mental techniques that appeared consistently among high achievers across different fields. These weren't vague principles, but precise thought patterns and mental habits that could be learned and replicated. I tested these techniques with thousands of ordinary men and women and refined them based on real-world results. What emerged was a comprehensive system for recognizing and neutralizing the fears generated by your inner saboteur. A system that doesn't just work occasionally or for certain types of people, but consistently produces transformative results for anyone who applies it with persistence and precision. You might be wondering if this approach will work for you specifically. Perhaps you believe your fears are uniquely powerful or deeply rooted. Perhaps previous attempts at overcoming them have left you discouraged. I understand these concerns, but let me share something I've observed in working with people from every walk of life. The very intensity of your fear is a measurement of your untapped potential. Those with the most powerful inner saboteurs often possess the greatest capacity for achievement once they learn to redirect that enormous psychological energy. Your fears aren't evidence of your limitations. They're indicators of your possibilities. What you're about to discover is something that the vast majority of people will never know. While they continue to be controlled by their fears or waste energy fighting against them, you'll learn how to transform those same fears into your greatest asset. Imagine walking into situations that once terrified you, not with nervous apprehension but with a sense of excited anticipation. Imagine viewing obstacles not as barriers but as opportunities to apply your creative energy. Imagine waking each morning not dreading the challenges ahead but eager to engage with them, knowing they are the raw material from which you'll build your success. This transformation isn't just possible, it's inevitable when you apply the principles I'm about to share. I've witnessed it in the lives of countless individuals who appeared to be permanently limited by their fears until they learned this method of fear transmutation. The path I'm offering isn't the easiest one. It requires honest self-examination and consistent practice. but it is unquestionably the most direct route to the life you truly desire. While others spend years, even decades, trying different techniques with minimal results, you'll be implementing a proven system that addresses the root cause of self-limitation. In the next section of our discussion, I'll reveal the first principle of this methodology, a cognitive tool so powerful that many have reported immediate shifts in their relationship with fear upon applying it. This principle alone has been sufficient to break the grip of decades-long patterns of self-sabotage. Are you ready to discover what truly becomes possible when you deactivate the fears created by your inner saboteur? Now write the fourth part, Principles Fundamentaux, approximately 1800 words. How to deactivate the fears created by your inner saboteur, continued. The first fundamental principle in deactivating your inner saboteur is what I call conscious fear identification. Most people experience fear as an amorphous cloud of discomfort, an undefined sense of dread that seems to arise from nowhere and everywhere at once. This vagueness is precisely what gives your inner saboteur its power, like a shadow monster on the wall of a darkened room. The undefined nature of the fear makes it appear larger and more threatening than it actually is. Conscious fear identification is the process of turning on the light, of bringing precise definition to what has remained strategically vague. When you can name your fear with specificity, when you can articulate exactly what you believe might happen if you take action, you immediately reduce its power over you. Consider the case of a young executive I worked with who consistently avoided speaking up in important meetings despite having valuable insights to share. When I asked him what he feared would happen, his first response was vague. "I'm just not comfortable speaking in front of groups." This undefined discomfort gave his inner saboteur free rein to control his behavior. Through the process of conscious fear identification, I asked him to articulate precisely what he believed might happen if he did speak up. Initially reluctant, he eventually admitted, "I fear that I'll say something incorrectly, that the company president will contradict me publicly, and that I'll lose credibility with everyone in the room." Notice the transformation that occurred simply through this act of precise identification. What was once an amorphous cloud of anxiety became a specific scenario that could be examined objectively. Once articulated, the fear lost much of its intimidating power, and he could evaluate the actual likelihood of his worst-case scenario occurring and the true consequences if it did. Think of your fears as creatures that thrive in darkness. By shining the bright light of conscious awareness on them, by naming them specifically, you begin the process of gaining mastery over them. Your inner saboteur depends on keeping your fears in the shadows, undefined and therefore unexamined. I want you to imagine your mind as a vast estate and your conscious attention as a powerful spotlight. For years, your inner saboteur has been hiding your fears in the darkened corners of this estate, keeping them just out of view while ensuring that their influence pervades everything you do. Conscious fear identification is your way of systematically illuminating every corner, leaving your saboteur with nowhere to hide. When Thomas Edison faced repeated failures in his attempt to create a practical incandescent light bulb, he didn't allow himself to be paralyzed by a vague fear of failure. Instead, he specifically identified each technical problem, each specific fear, and addressed them one by one. "I have not failed," he famously remarked. "I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This is conscious fear identification in action. Try this exercise today when you feel resistance to taking an important action. Ask yourself, what specifically am I afraid might happen? Keep refining your answer until you've reached the root specificity of your fear. You'll find that the mere act of bringing precise definition to your fear diminishes its power and begins the process of transmutation. The second principle I've identified through my research is what I call the opposite response system. This principle recognizes a profound psychological truth: your internal state creates your external reality. Far more than external circumstances create your internal state. Your inner saboteur operates by convincing you that your feelings should determine your actions. If you feel afraid, you should retreat. If you feel uncertain, you should wait. If you feel inadequate, you should avoid the challenge. This instinctive alignment of action with emotion seems natural, but it is precisely this pattern that ensures your saboteur maintains control. The opposite response system inverts this relationship. It states that to achieve extraordinary outcomes, you must learn to act in direct opposition to what your fears suggest. When your inner saboteur urges retreat, you advance. When it counsels caution, you take calculated risks. When it whispers inadequacy, you step forward with bold confidence. Think of yourself as the captain of a ship navigating through treacherous waters. Your inner saboteur is like a deceptive compass that always points toward safe harbors and away from your true destination. The opposite response system is your recognition that to reach your goals, you must often steer in precisely the opposite direction from what this deceptive compass suggests. I recall the story of a salesman who had become paralyzed by his fear of rejection. Each morning, his inner saboteur would provide compelling reasons why that day was not ideal for making sales calls. The logic always seemed sound. The economic climate was unfavorable. Potential clients would be busy. His presentation needed more refinement. Upon learning the opposite response system, he made a radical decision. Whenever he felt a strong internal resistance to making a sales call, he would immediately make not one but 3 calls. The stronger the resistance, the more calls he would make. Within 60 days, he had transformed from the lowest performer in his company to one of the top 3. This principle applies universally. Whatever action your fear most strongly resists is likely the very action most essential to your growth. Your inner saboteur knows your path to greatness and strategically places the greatest resistance precisely where breakthrough awaits. Imagine fear as a compass that has been deliberately designed to point you away from your greatest opportunities. By reading it in reverse, by moving toward what frightens you rather than away from it, you transform this deceptive instrument into a reliable guide toward extraordinary achievement. The third principle that emerged from my research is what I call strategic expectation management. This principle addresses a critical vulnerability that your inner saboteur exploits. Your expectations about how you should feel when taking important action. Most people believe they must feel confident before taking significant action. They wait for fear to subside, for doubt to disappear, for confidence to arise naturally before moving forward. This expectation creates a perfect trap, because your inner saboteur ensures that when facing truly important opportunities, confidence will be precisely what's missing. Strategic expectation management revolutionizes this approach by establishing a new expectation: that fear, doubt, and uncertainty are not just normal but necessary companions on the path to extraordinary achievement. Rather than waiting for these feelings to disappear, you learn to expect and even welcome them as signposts indicating that you're moving in the right direction. Consider how a seasoned warrior approaches battle. Does he expect to feel no fear? Does he wait until all anxiety has subsided before advancing? Of course not. He expects fear will be present, but he has trained himself to act with it, through it, and despite it. Your relationship with the fears generated by your inner saboteur must follow this same pattern. I remember speaking with a renowned public speaker who regularly addressed audiences of thousands. When I asked if he still experienced nervousness before speaking, he laughed and said, "Every single time. And the day I don't feel that nervous energy is the day I'll deliver a flat, uninspiring talk." He had mastered strategic expectation management, recognizing that the energy of fear, when properly channeled, becomes the very passion that makes his presentations compelling. Picture your journey toward success as climbing a mountain. Your inner saboteur wants you to believe that if you are on the right path, the climb would feel comfortable and safe. Strategic expectation management helps you understand that the steepest, most challenging sections, the ones that trigger the most fear, are precisely the ones that lead to the summit. The fourth principle I've identified is deliberate identity evolution. This profound concept recognizes that your inner saboteur maintains power largely by convincing you to identify with your current limitations rather than your potential. Every person carries within them not one but many possible identities, many versions of themselves they might become. Your inner saboteur's primary strategy is to keep you firmly identified with the most limited version, the one defined by past failures and current fears. Deliberate identity evolution is the conscious practice of identifying with the person you are capable of becoming rather than the person your fears have convinced you that you are. This isn't pretending or fake it till you make it. It's a profound psychological shift in how you define yourself at the most fundamental level. Consider how a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly. At a cellular level, special cells called imaginal discs already contain the blueprint of the butterfly even while the creature still crawls as a caterpillar. Your mind works similarly. Within you now are the imaginal discs of your highest potential, the mental and spiritual blueprint of what you might become. One of my most successful students was a woman who had experienced early business failures that left her doubting her capacities. Her inner saboteur had constructed an identity for her as someone who lacks business acumen. Through deliberate identity evolution, she began consciously identifying with a new self-concept, not as the person who had failed in business, but as someone who had gained valuable experience that prepared her for success. She would ask herself daily, how would a brilliant, confident entrepreneur approach this situation? Rather than acting from her fear-based identity, she acted from this evolved identity. Within 18 months, she had built a thriving enterprise that surpassed even her most ambitious expectations. Think of yourself as an actor who has been playing a limited role written by your inner saboteur. Deliberate identity evolution is your decision to step into a new, expanded role, one that better reflects your true capabilities. As you consistently act from this evolved identity, you'll find that what once seemed like pretending gradually becomes your authentic expression. Each of these principles, conscious fear identification, the opposite response system, strategic expectation management, and deliberate identity evolution, represents a specific mental technology for neutralizing your inner saboteur. They work not by eliminating fear, but by transforming your relationship with it. I urge you to reflect on these principles and consider which one speaks most directly to your current challenges. Which principle, if applied consistently starting today, would have the most profound impact on your progress? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The act of articulating your intention publicly will strengthen your commitment to implementation. Remember, these principles are not theoretical constructs, but practical tools that have been extracted from the actual thought patterns of remarkably successful individuals. They represent not what should work in theory, but what has been proven to work in practice across thousands of lives. At this point, I can almost hear the objections forming in your mind. Your inner saboteur, sensing the threat these principles pose to its control, is already mobilizing its defenses. Let me address the most common resistances that arise when people begin applying these methods. You may be thinking, this sounds good in theory, Mr. Hill, but my fears are particularly deep-rooted. They've been with me since childhood. Indeed, the longevity of a fear can make it seem more permanent than it actually is. But consider this. Is the persistence of your fear evidence of its truth, or merely evidence of how consistently you've reinforced it? The oak tree that has stood for 100 years appears unmovable until the moment the lumberjack applies his axe with knowledge and precision. No fear, regardless of how long established, can withstand the consistent application of these principles. Perhaps you're wondering, what if I apply these principles and still fail? Won't that confirm my fears were justified all along? This concern reveals a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of achievement. Temporary failure is not evidence that your fears were correct. It is simply part of the process of growth. Edison's 10,000 unsuccessful attempts to create the light bulb were not 10,000 confirmations that his goal was impossible. They were 10,000 refinements of his approach. When you apply these principles properly, you recognize that temporary setbacks are not confirmations of your limitations, but clarifications of your path. Some of you may be thinking, I've tried positive thinking before, and it didn't work for me. Let me be absolutely clear. What I'm sharing is not positive thinking. Positive thinking attempts to overlay optimistic thoughts on top of deeply held fears. The principles I've outlined work at a much deeper level, addressing not just your conscious thoughts, but the fundamental beliefs and identities that generate those thoughts. We're not painting over rust. We're transforming the metal itself. You might also be concerned about timing. Is now really the right moment to make such significant changes in my thinking? Shouldn't I wait until my circumstances are more favorable? This objection is perhaps the most insidious of all, as it seems so reasonable. Yet history shows undeniably that extraordinary individuals initiate change precisely when circumstances seem least favorable. Remember that conditions will never align perfectly. There will always be reasons to delay. Your inner saboteur knows this and uses the promise of someday to ensure that day never arrives. Another objection I frequently encounter is, what will others think if I suddenly begin acting with this new level of confidence and ambition? This concern reveals how thoroughly social conditioning supports your inner saboteur. Consider this. Those who truly care about you will celebrate your growth, even if your transformation initially surprises them. Those who resist your evolution were never truly allies in your journey toward greatness. Their discomfort reflects their own inner limitations, not yours. Have you asked yourself whether you have what it takes to apply these principles consistently? This doubt, this question of whether you possess sufficient willpower or discipline is another strategic maneuver by your inner saboteur. The truth is that willpower is not a fixed quality but a capacity that grows through exercise. The very act of beginning, of applying these principles, even imperfectly at first, strengthens your ability to apply them more effectively in the future. Some of you may be wondering if these principles apply to your specific field or circumstances. My industry is different. You might think, the challenges I face are unique. While the details of your situation are indeed unique, the fundamental patterns of fear and self-limitation operate identically across all human endeavors. Whether you're an artist or entrepreneur, scientist or parent, the inner saboteur employs the same strategies, and these principles neutralize those strategies with equal effectiveness across all domains. Finally, you might be asking yourself whether real transformation is truly possible, or whether we are ultimately bound by inherent limitations. To this, I can only respond with the evidence of countless lives transformed. I have witnessed individuals overcome obstacles that seemed utterly insurmountable through the application of these principles. The question is not whether transformation is possible, but whether you are willing to challenge your most deeply held beliefs about what's possible for you. Ask yourself this. What if the very objections arising in your mind right now are not rational cautions but the desperate attempts of your inner saboteur to maintain control? What if your hesitation is not wisdom but fear disguised as prudence? While each principle I've shared is powerful in isolation, Their true potency emerges when they are integrated into a cohesive system. Just as a master pianist doesn't play isolated notes but creates harmony through their relationship. These principles work together to create a symphony of psychological transformation. Let me show you how these elements form not just a collection of techniques, but a comprehensive framework for permanent liberation from your inner saboteur. Imagine your mind as a magnificent garden. For years, your inner saboteur has been the primary gardener, systematically planting seeds of doubt, watering fears until they flourish, and pruning away confidence before it can fully bloom. The principles I've shared represent your taking control of this garden, becoming the master gardener of your own consciousness. Conscious fear identification serves as your inventory of the garden, allowing you to recognize exactly what has been planted and where. The opposite response system is your decision to plant entirely different seeds precisely where your saboteur has focused its greatest attention. Strategic expectation management adjusts your understanding of the natural growth process, helping you recognize that periods of apparent dormancy and struggle are essential parts of development. Deliberate identity evolution transforms you from someone who merely tends a garden into one who is the garden itself, who recognizes that you and what you cultivate are ultimately inseparable. This integrated approach creates what I call a success consciousness, a fundamental shift in how you experience yourself and the world around you. Within this consciousness, what once appeared as obstacles now register as opportunities. What seemed like limitations reveal themselves as focusing mechanisms that channel your energy toward specific achievements. Consider how this integration might apply in a practical situation. Imagine you have the opportunity to take a leadership position that represents a significant advancement in your career, but your inner saboteur floods you with doubts about your readiness. First, through conscious fear identification, you bring specific definition to your fears. I'm afraid I'll be exposed as unqualified. I'm afraid my team won't respect me. I'm afraid I'll make a decision that causes the project to fail. The vague cloud of anxiety transforms into specific scenarios that can be addressed. Next, applying the opposite response system. You recognize that your saboteur's strong resistance to taking this position is actually a reliable indicator of its importance to your growth. Rather than retreating from the opportunity, you move decisively toward it, understanding that the intensity of your fear correlates directly with the potential for advancement. Through strategic expectation management, you embrace the nervous energy and uncertainty as normal and necessary aspects of growth rather than warning signs. You recognize that if this new position felt entirely comfortable, it would likely represent lateral movement rather than true advancement. Finally, with deliberate identity evolution, you begin making decisions not from the identity of someone hoping to prove themselves worthy of leadership, but from the identity of a natural leader who has temporarily forgotten their capabilities. You ask yourself not how can I avoid failure, but how would a brilliant, confident leader approach this situation? This integration creates a self-reinforcing cycle of growth. Each principle strengthens the others, creating momentum that becomes increasingly difficult for your inner saboteur to resist. The process transforms from a series of conscious techniques into an automatic way of being. Let me offer you a practical framework for implementing this integrated approach in your daily life. Begin each morning with a 5-minute practice of conscious fear identification, asking yourself what specific fears might arise that day and bringing precise definition to them. Throughout the day, when you notice resistance to an important action, apply the opposite response system by moving directly toward what creates the strongest discomfort. When fear or uncertainty arises, practice strategic expectation management by reminding yourself that these feelings are not warning signs but natural companions on the path to achievement. Before facing any significant challenge, take a moment for deliberate identity evolution, asking yourself, how would the most capable version of myself approach this situation? This simple, daily practice, maintained with consistency, will gradually rewire the neural pathways of your mind. What begins as conscious effort eventually becomes your natural orientation toward life's challenges. Think of this integration as similar to learning to drive a car. Initially, each component, steering, accelerating, braking, checking mirrors, requires conscious attention. But with practice, these separate actions blend into the single activity of driving, which you execute with minimal conscious thought. Similarly, these principles, applied consistently, blend into the single consciousness of achievement. The true power of this integrated approach lies not just in what it helps you achieve externally, but in who you become through its application. As you consistently deactivate the fears created by your inner saboteur, you experience yourself more and more as you truly are, unbounded by artificial limitations, capable of contributions you once thought impossible. This integration doesn't just change what you do, it transforms who you are at the most fundamental level. And it is from this transformed identity that your greatest achievements will naturally flow, not as strained efforts, but as authentic expressions of your expanded self. My friends, we stand now at a critical juncture, that pivotal moment between knowledge and action that determines whether what you've learned today will become a transformative force in your life, or simply another interesting idea that passes through your consciousness without taking root. Let me speak plainly. The principles I've shared with you are not academic theories to be contemplated, but practical tools to be wielded. They represent the distilled wisdom of hundreds of remarkable achievers who discovered, often through years of painful trial and error, how to systematically disarm the fears created by their inner saboteurs. But this knowledge, powerful as it is, remains dormant until activated by your decision to apply it. The question before you now is not whether these principles work. Their effectiveness has been demonstrated across thousands of lives in every conceivable circumstance. The only question is whether you will give yourself permission to experience their power firsthand. I want you to understand something of profound importance. The very moment you begin applying these principles consistently, you join an extraordinary minority of individuals who have discovered the most fundamental secret of human achievement, that our limitations exist primarily in our minds, carefully maintained by an inner saboteur whose power depends entirely on our belief in its authority. Right now, your inner saboteur is mobilizing its most persuasive arguments for why you should delay implementation. It's suggesting that you need more time to consider these ideas, that you should wait for more favorable circumstances, that perhaps these principles worked for others, but your situation is somehow different. Recognize these thoughts for what they are, not rational caution, but desperate attempts to maintain the status quo. The path forward is clear. Starting today, starting this very hour, you must begin the process of conscious implementation. Not tomorrow, not when you feel more confident, not when circumstances seem more favorable, but now. For it is only through immediate action that you build the momentum necessary to overcome the gravitational pull of old patterns. Let me offer you a specific challenge. Identify one significant fear that has consistently held you back. One area where your inner saboteur has maintained control. Perhaps it's the fear of public speaking that has limited your professional advancement. Perhaps it's the fear of rejection that has prevented you from pursuing meaningful relationships. Perhaps it's the fear of failure that has kept your greatest ideas forever confined to the realm of someday. Whatever this fear may be, I challenge you to apply the integrated framework I've shared to this specific area over the next 30 days. Begin each morning with conscious fear identification. bringing precise definition to the specific scenarios your saboteur wants you to avoid. Apply the opposite response system by moving deliberately toward what creates discomfort. Practice strategic expectation management by embracing the nervous energy as a sign of growth rather than danger. Engage in deliberate identity evolution by acting from the perspective of who you are capable of becoming rather than who your fears have convinced you that you are. Commit to this practice for 30 consecutive days without exception. This consistency is non-negotiable. Just as you cannot develop a physically strong body by exercising occasionally when inspiration strikes, you cannot develop a strong mind through sporadic application of these principles. The inner saboteur's greatest ally is inconsistency, for it knows that interrupted practice prevents the formation of new neural pathways. The decision before you carries implications far beyond your individual life. When you liberate yourself from the invisible chains of fear, you become living proof of what's possible for others. Your transformation becomes a beacon that illuminates the path for countless individuals who remain trapped in self-imposed limitations. Think for a moment about the ripple effects of your liberation. Consider how your increased courage will influence your children, your colleagues, your community. Imagine the innovations you might create, the problems you might solve, the inspiration you might provide, when you begin operating from your full potential rather than the restricted range your inner saboteur has permitted. I cannot emphasize strongly enough the urgency of your decision. Every day you postpone implementation, every opportunity you avoid due to fear, represents an irretrievable loss not just for you but for all who would benefit from your fully expressed gifts. The most dangerous aspect of the inner saboteur is its patience. It is perfectly content to let you learn about these principles, reflect on them, even appreciate their wisdom, as long as you don't actually apply them. It knows that passive knowledge poses no threat to its control. Only consistent action can break its hold over your life. My friends, I have dedicated my life to studying and sharing the principles that separate extraordinary achievers from those who merely dream of achievement. I have witnessed these principles transform the lives of people from every background, overcoming obstacles far greater than those most of us will ever face. There is nothing magical or mystical about this transformation. It follows predictable psychological patterns that become available to anyone with the courage to apply them consistently. The choice is yours, and it is a choice you make not once, but continually. Will you remain in the familiar territory of limitation, allowing your inner saboteur to determine the boundaries of your life? Or will you step into the expanding territory of possibility, reclaiming your authority over your own mind and, by extension, your destiny? I urge you to make this commitment to yourself, starting today. You will no longer allow fear to be the primary architect of your decisions. You will recognize the voice of your inner saboteur for what it is and systematically disarm it using the principles we've explored. Subscribe to this channel now to join our community of individuals committed to this path of transformation. Leave a comment below sharing the most significant insight you've gained from our discussion today and how you intend to apply it. Your public declaration will strengthen your commitment and inspire others to begin their own journey. Remember, the quality of your life is determined not by what you know, but by what you do consistently. The time for action is now. Your extraordinary life awaits.